You're listening to the Wordslinger podcast, episode 118, Getting Author Friendly with Carla King. This episode of the Wordslinger podcast is brought to you by Draft to Digital. Convert your manuscript, distribute it online, and get support the whole way at drafttodigital.com.
It's the Wordslinger podcast, where story matters. Build your brand, write your book, redefine who you are. It's all about the story here. What's yours? Now, here's the guy who invented pants optional, Kevin Tumlinson, the Wordslinger.
Wordslinger.
Hey everybody, this is Kevin Tumlinson, the Wordslinger. Thanks for tuning in for another week of Wordslinger hijinks, we'll call them. Today I've got three things I want to throw out there to you from people who've called or written in. So I won't dilly-dally. But real quick, I just wanted to say this is the 30th of June. As of the very moment I'm recording this, that means that 4th of July is coming up. Here in America, that's Independence Day. Very important holiday for us. We're celebrating our independence from England, frankly. This is our celebration of the day that we officially became a country. I guess that's not quite true. It's our celebration of the day that we became independent, an independent nation. That's a more accurate way to phrase that. Back off, historians. I know history too. I wanted to just say to everyone, have a happy and safe holiday weekend. If you're here in the U.S., if you're celebrating abroad as well. I know there's expats who listen to the show, so just be safe. Every year you hear about tragedies and things that happen. People get a little too crazy with the fireworks, or they decide that firearms are fireworks. That's not good. Don't do that. Shooting things on the 4th of July probably shouldn't be a thing. Sorry. And there's alcohol and all kinds of other recreational chemicals floating around out there. Just what I'm trying to say here is, folks, just be careful, okay? I want you to come back around next Friday and listen in on another show. I don't want you to have all your various digits and eyes and ears and that sort of thing intact. There you go. A friendly warning or word of advice from the friendly neighborhood Wordslinger. So anyway, now our plans for the holiday. We don't get to use the RV because the RV's in for some repairs. It's been... I don't even want to go into it now. I'm heart sick over the amount of time the RV has had to spend for maintenance and repair. It's whatever. It is what it is. It's part of the RV life. I'm glad that we now have our home base so that we don't have to bunk out with someone else while we're waiting for the RV to be fixed or maintained. But it would be nice to have it for this long weekend. We actually thought about going on a road trip. We may still. We actually got a new vehicle. We traded in. I don't want to hear the backlash on this. I already got an earful from people, but my wife and I had a leased Toyota, and it was our second lease in a row. I do not approve of this, by the way. I don't like the idea of leasing a car. I think it's a waste. But at the time, it fit with our needs, and we didn't know what was going to be happening with the RV. It fit, but it came due a couple of weekends ago, and we got a new vehicle. We got a Toyota Highlander. It's not actually new. It's slightly used. It was like a 2015. Not all that used, but in great shape and a good price. So we got that. Now, what's cool about the Highlander is it's bigger than the Venza, which is what we had before. It's still on a car frame. It's not on a truck frame. I personally am thinking about getting a 4Runner at some point because I dig them, and that's on a truck frame, a little more rugged. But the Highlander has the kind of space we would need if we wanted to do something like go dry dock camping, whatever. Boondocking is what I'm trying to say here. There's another term for it. It's like dry camping or something like that. Don't ask me why I don't know that right now. I talk about it all the time. But basically, we could go set up and sleep in the back of the car and have a tent and have all the amenities for camping. So we may do that since we don't have our luxurious RV with us. But the great thing about that sort of thing is you can go to more like national parks, national forests, that sort of thing, where you wouldn't normally be able to bring, first of all, a large RV. Usually anything under 40 foot, I think, is allowed in most like national parks and state parks, but there are some places that won't let you bring any sort of RV or camper. or at least nothing all that big. And we can get in with a car. Sometimes we've done that in the past where when we had my truck, I had a truck tent. We went and camped out and put the tent up. We had a little inflatable mattress. It was nice, actually. It was a nice setup, and so we've got the means to do that. So we may do that this weekend. I don't know where we'll go. We're thinking Fredericksburg. We like it up in that area. It's hill country, and we found a couple of spots that were really beautiful, but we'll see. And we've made no reservations and no plans because that's the way we like to roll. It's just it. It's the discovery that's more fun than anything. Anyway, I promised you some words from, we'll just call them slingers. Some words from some of my recent slingers who reached out and contacted me. The first is an email I got. And by the way, if you want to reach out to me via email, go to wordslingerpodcast.com, hit contact, and you can send me an email right from that page. But this is from Julian Raspberry. Sorry. And the subject is, I'm a fan. So Julian won me over already. So anyway, here we go. Julian says, I just finished binge listening to all prior episodes and am eager for the next. Count me as a great fan. Thanks for being the inspiration you are. I'm about halfway through my first novel. I appreciate all the nuggets of gold you dispense on each and every show. I also just finished posting a 5-star review on iTunes. Took a while to figure out how to do it. I know. I'm sorry, Julian. And I do have a request. How about considering the topic of pen names for one of your upcoming episodes? Thanks again, and keep them coming. God bless. Julian, thanks. Pen names would be a very interesting topic. So I'm going to look into, I know a few folks who write under pen names. We'll talk to them, see if they're willing to come out, as it were. Maybe they'll discuss that. Or maybe I'll just have them on the show and they don't have to discuss who their pen name is. We'll do something like that. I don't write under pen names myself, obviously. And by the way, Julian, I'm sorry. I misread the first time I read your email. So I thought you were telling me you had picked up my first novel. You're halfway through your first novel. Very different message, and congratulations. I think that's amazing, and let's get you to the finish line. We're gonna figure that out for you. But anyway, yes, pen names would be a great topic. If you would also like to suggest topics, by the way, fellow listeners and slingers, that's a great idea. I love that. I'm always considering angles. I don't really do topical shows that much. Maybe I should just start doing that. Say, I'm going to talk about pen names and go find folks to talk about pen names, or just do an episode about that. Anyway, thanks for writing in, Julian. I appreciate it. And thanks for being a fan. I am also a fan of yours. So good luck with the book. If there's any way I can help, just ask. All right. Next up, I got a voicemail. Now, you've heard from this person before. This is a slinger who has been on the show by voice, at least. They're all by voice. But this is a slinger who has left a voice message before, and I'm talking about Aloysius Kling. So, Aloysius, take us away.
Hi, Kevin. Aloysius Kling here again. So, as a new writer, I find that describing scenes and writing character actions goes pretty well for me. But I still have a hard time with dialogue. It takes me quite a few pages to find a character's voice, and even then I'm afraid that all my characters end up sounding the same. I particularly have trouble with female characters. In my current work in progress, I have a minor female character whose role I plan to greatly expand, but I keep getting hung up on her dialogue. I don't know if that's sexist or not. I don't mean it to be. I'm just trying to write it as realistically as I can, or as realistically as you can in a fantasy setting where everything is made up. But what advice would you have for a male writer who's trying to write for female characters and struggling? Thanks again, and I look forward to your feedback, and I love the show.
Hey, thanks, Aloysius. Okay, dialogue that's one of the trickiest things that you can master when it comes to craft. Because honestly, you can, and people do this, I do this, you can get by with very little description about setting or the characters themselves and define your story entirely with your dialogue. This is what I do, okay? And some people will criticize it, but the fact is, this is what happens a lot in film and television, and in a lot of the finer works that you've read from folks like Hemingway. You get less description and more of a feeling of where you are and what's going on through dialogue. So it's very tricky. It's tough to master, but it's something crucial. So you're on the right track just by wanting to know more. So here's the deal. The real key to just understanding dialogue in general is making sure that you're listening. You develop an ear for dialogue in the world around you. You can start by just paying close attention to how people talk in movies and television. while that is not always the most realistic dialogue in the world, we're used to hearing it. And so if you pick up on the rhythms and cadence of how people talk in good films, and don't go with, as much as I think Aaron Sorkin is a master of dialogue, you should definitely go check out anything Aaron Sorkin's done and see how he handles dialogue. But sometimes it gets into patter with him. I would definitely listen to him and mimic him at times. But for the most part, go out and find films where people are just having conversations and are being very casual, and listen to how they talk. Listen to how the women speak. The thing about writing dialogue for women, honestly, women are people too. Women are, I know this was a revelation to some people. It shouldn't be, but no, but honestly, dialogue is dialogue. The gender shouldn't impact the dialogue that much. What you want is intelligence. You want the character to reflect who they actually are through how they speak. So it doesn't matter what their gender is, but it might matter what their role is. So in particular, when you're watching films and television, and also when you're eavesdropping on conversations out in the real world, which you should be doing for the sake of your art, not for any sort of, and not for any other reasons, but you should listen to every time someone speaks. You should listen to what they're saying and how they're saying it. Sometimes you can't translate that directly onto the page effectively. We tend to speaking with a lot of gaps, with a lot of dropped syllables, that sort of thing, and we have a lot of uhs and ums, as I will demonstrate throughout the program. But and sometimes you can put those in, especially if you want your character to seem hesitant. So you want to pay attention to how people speak and what they're conveying when they speak, what emotion they're projecting when they speak, what tone the conversation is taking, and not just the words, but start listening to the inflection, start listening to the rhythm of it. Like I said, this is very difficult to master, but the key is just like reading frequently and broadly is training for the language muscle in your brain. Listening closely to the dialogue you hear around you all the time is your training for that particular muscle. So I know that's not an ABC steps kind of thing, unfortunately, but the way most authors master dialogue is listening closely to dialogue. Pay attention also to what you read in dialogue. See what works for you. Attribution is sometimes important. I tend towards Stephen King's rule of just use the word said when you're doing attributions, and that's to avoid what the Swifties, the exclamations and the funky adjectives and stuff that people sometimes use for attributing dialogue. Experiment a little though. Find what works for you as far as conveying the emotion of the setting. And since you're in a fantasy setting, honestly, you can get away with just about anything. The affect of the character's dialogue can be just about anything. But you want to go and research that genre too. Look specifically at books that are like your book and see how that author is handling dialogue. This may be a completely unsatisfactory answer, man, and I apologize. But I honestly, and by the way, if you're a listener and you have a surefire process for doing dialogue, you should write in or call in or something and let me know. But my process has always been just to pay very close attention to how people interact with each other and talk to each other out in the wild and in movies and television. Movies and TV are the best training I know for dialogue, because they're all dialogue. As much as you see action on screen, all of that was at one point a script that was primarily dialogue. You want to avoid exposition through dialogue. You don't want to rely on the character speaking in order to move the action forward or to explain something that's happening in the background or whatever. You don't want characters standing aside, basically, and lecturing the reader on what's happening in that universe. But you can convey a lot about what's happening in a scene through the short, punchy sort of dialogue that characters would have if they're, say, facing an army of ogres or something. Just imagine what the conversation would be. So, anyway, I hope that helps. If not, hit me again, and if we have to, we'll get on the line together, man. We'll talk voice to voice, and we'll work it out. So, anyway, so there is another question down. Now, I got one final email, and this is a quick one, and then we're going to jump right into this interview with Carla King, which I think everyone is going to dig. We're a little late, so I apologize. We're running nearly 18 minutes now, but this is a real quick one. I got a message on Facebook from Chris Britton. I've edited out some parts, Chris, so I hope you're okay with that, but he wrote to say, "Hi, Kevin. Many thanks for your advice and ongoing podcast greatness." Thank you, Chris. "Hope RV life is treating you well." Yes. Although at the moment we're just not really living much of an RV life, but yeah, we've enjoyed it. And P.S. a podcast mention would be very lovely. How cheeky of me. And there you go, Chris. There's your podcast mention, and I'm happy to do it. If you would like to check out, Chris has his own book. If you want to check him out, it's called, and let me back up. Okay, it's called Reunion. It's a mystery, crime, dark comedy, and you can pick up the Kindle edition and paperback on Amazon. Just go. My recommendation is to search for Chris Britton, Britten, and Reunion, and you're gonna find it right away. There you go, Chris. There's your free podcast mention. Everybody gets one. No, that's not quite true. I don't want to be flooded with requests for mentions, but tactfully you may approach me. So anyway, we're nearly 20 minutes in. I apologize for that we're running a little late, but I am going to get us right in with Carla King. You're going to love this interview. She is the founder of Author Friendly Publishing Services. She has the Self-Publishing Boot Camp, and I think that's going to be an eye-opener for everyone. So listen in on this interview with Carla King, and I'll see you on the other side. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in, and this time around I'm talking to somebody. Now I just recently had a chance to hang out with her at the San Francisco Writers Conference in San Francisco, but I'm actually talking with Carla King. She's the founder of Author Friendly Publishing Services, among other things. She's into a whole bunch of stuff. She's a little bit like a certain wordslinger we know, into nomadia as well, technical nomadia, that sort of thing. So we're going to have a great conversation with Carla. I'm looking forward to this, actually. Carla, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, Kevin, I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, it was great meeting you at the conference, and I know we had like only the briefest of introductions before I showed up there. But you were organizing the entire self-publishing track there, right?
Yeah, it's gotten bigger and bigger every year for obvious reasons.
Yes, and you did a great job, by the way. It was a great track because you invited the other guys, the non-drafted digital guys, but they were fun to hang out with too. I got to hang out with Mark from Smash Words, and I got to hang out with Justin Renard from Pronoun, and those guys were pretty great too.
Yeah,
you did
and
good.
Robin Cutler from Ingram Spark. Gosh, Stephen Spots from Book Baby, and
yeah, there was quite a crowd there. There's a lot of known names. So I guess that's a good place to start. By the way, is how did you become involved with the conference?
I'm a native Bay Area person. I was actually born and raised in North Carolina, but came to the Bay Area when I was 16. 16. My dad worked for IBM. I've been moved.
Okay, transplant.
And, so at 16, going from rural North Carolina, if I get drunk, you'll hear me draw, to hop in San Francisco Bay Area, it was quite the shift in my consciousness.
Yeah. Yes. Did you ever have the urge to go back?
I love my family, but no.
Yeah, I could see.
It's a beautiful place. I've motorcycled in the Blue Ridge Mountains and done all that as a tourist now, but don't live there anymore.
Yeah. The motorcycle thing, we're definitely going to talk about. It's hard to narrow down what to talk about with you. I'm going to be honest with you because there's so many things. And you're like me. You're into a whole bunch of different things. The motorcycle stuff, we're going to get to that. But I want to talk first because I want to make sure we cover it because you're the founder of Author Friendly Publishing Services, and I want to know more of the background of that and what that means for authors.
Well, growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area, I was a technical writer by trade, and I was in Multimedia Gulch when CD-ROMs and the internet was happening.
Yeah.
And then I worked for Hewlett-Packard and had a contract in Lyon, France.
Okay.
And all of a sudden I wanted to be a travel writer, right? Because everybody wants to be a travel writer.
At some point, yeah.
Exactly. So I started writing travel articles and I had no idea how to do it. So I came back to the Bay Area and I went to a travel writing conference put on by Book Passage, which is the Bay Area's most beloved bookstore in Marin.
Yeah.
And I got to talk to actual travel writers and people who were hiring them to write. And one of those people was Alan Noren, and he was working for O'Reilly and Associates, which is now O'Reilly Media. Right. And this thing called the internet was happening. Nobody had really heard of it. Not a whole lot of people had heard of it yet.
Right.
And they had this idea that it would be cool to do live dispatches from travel writers who were actually on the road doing stuff.
Yeah.
And they couldn't find a travel writer who knew FTP, HTTP, all of that. So they were hiring these people, and they were failing because they would fry their modems and a digital system, phone system in China.
Yeah.
So I said FTP and HTTP, and Alan was like, "Oh my gosh, that's great!" And he had arrived on a motorcycle, and I have been a motorcycle enthusiast for a long time. I've ridden since I was a kid.
Yeah.
So we connected over that, and I said I came back to the U.S. just recently, and my plan was, because so many people in France and Europe said, "What's America like?" and I could only tell them about California and North Carolina. I had vowed to go on a motorcycle trip around the United States and find out more about my own country. It's a big, fascinating country. And he said, "Why don't you write about it for O'Reilly?" Wow. And so then I went and chose a motorcycle, and there was a Russian Ural motorcycle that this guy was importing from Russia, the Ural Mountains, as a possible business supplying this specialty bike to the industry, but it had some problems. So he didn't know if it would actually, I asked him about it, he didn't know if it would actually make it to Montana. And I said, "I'm a country girl, I'm good with mechanics, and this looks like a cool machine. It's this big sidecar motorcycle." Yeah. It's the kind that Steve McQueen rode in The Great Escape.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Like that. It's like that.
I don't know what kind of geek that makes me, that I know exactly what bike you're talking about now, but I'm happy to know that reference.
Yeah, so imagine that. So I said I would test ride it, and they said, okay, they would support me and send me parts if I needed, and I could write about it for the internet. And it wasn't, and so I set out on my trip, and the dang thing broke down every 100, 500 miles. I replaced 4 gas tanks, 5 alternators, the right whole side of the engine, everything. It's a simple machine. And as a country girl whose dad dragged her out to change the brakes on the tractor and repair my own car, it was just fine. Yeah. It was a good story, and all 500 people on the internet at the time really enjoyed it. And then it became a book. And then nobody wanted it, and so I self-published it. Okay. Actually self-published before that. In France, I wrote a little guide to bicycling the French Riviera that was tiny, and publishers wanted all of France. They didn't want just the Riviera. Right. So I published that, and I went back to France, and because I was a tech writer, I knew how to do it, you know? Yeah. And I made money to go back to France 2 more times as a tourist. So I was really happy about that. So by the time I published American Borders, it was 2004. And even before that, authors in San Francisco were asking me, how did you do that? Because as traditional publishing companies were starting to lowball their authors. Instead of 50,000, they'd offer them 15,000. Instead of 120,000, they'd offer them 40,000. And that's not a living.
Right, no.
In the Bay Area.
It's not living anywhere.
So I started giving these self-publishing boot camps, and it just became a business by popular demand. I was forced to create this business, and I was in this group called the Wild Writing Women, who were a group of travel writers, and we all started teaching, and we self-published a book called Wild Writing Women, Stories of World Travel that sold out. Yeah. In a week. We sold 1,000 copies in a week. In 2010. No, when was that? Oh my gosh. When was that?
Let's see. I'm looking at the book right now. Let's see.
Oh, you have it.
And I have the Amazon listing for
Virtual
it.
copy. The virtual
Yeah.
copy.
2002. April 1st, 2002.
2002.
Oh, you're coming up on your anniversary on that.
Gosh, wow. Yeah. So even more people wanted to know how to self-publish. And
Yeah.
then there was good old Dan Pointer, who passed away last year. We're sad we miss him. And so that was all that we had. And I started writing books, and then more and more self-publishing authors started writing books and teaching classes, and it all took off.
Yeah. Okay. There's so many things now I want to talk to you about based on that story. I'm like, holy crap, you've lived a better life than I have. That's just amazing. Okay, you go on first you start on an adventure that most people would pay anything or do anything to have, and then that led to 15 other adventures that anyone would give their left arm for.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. To ride cranky indigenous motorcycles in places like, well, America, India, Africa, breaking down all the time, I love it. No, most people don't like that level of spontaneity, but as a longtime traveler, it's boring when nothing happens because nobody can come to your rescue. You don't get to spend the night in a little village with all these people giving a banquet in your honor and tasting crazy foods and seeing how other people live.
Yeah. I'm on board with that, though.
You're good with it?
Oh, yeah. That's the kind of thing. That's the whole reason we started the whole RV lifestyle, was to do it. If it weren't for the fact that I'm married and want to stay that way, I would probably have just done the motorcycle tour, or probably just hopped in my truck, actually. When this all started, by the way, with a truck and a truck bed tent. That's how this whole adventure started for me. So
wow.
I would totally do it. I've done things like that. So
well, you have to get a worse truck. You got to get an old, broken down RV
exactly.
and then go.
Yeah, it's held together by duct tape and well wishing. Yeah. This one practically is right now. I say practically. I had to, a couple of times on our last couple of trips, I had to patch up some things using Gorilla Tape. So I'm like, okay, it's officially mine now. Now that I've had to hold together vital parts of it with tape, it's all mine now.
Gorilla Tape, by the way, Jonathan, my partner, and I, we go down to Baja a lot.
Yeah. And
he has an old Land Cruiser that he bought in the 80s just to go to Baja with. And the roof started cracking. Yeah. You know, the metal, and it rattled so much that we stopped and put Gorilla Tape all around that.
Yeah.
And that was 3 years ago. And it's still holding. It's still after 3 years. We don't need to get it welded.
No.
It's welded.
And, you know, our RV is fairly new, and the problem was a freak problem. But it's been several months now. I've taken it probably on about 10,000 miles since then, and I've yet to replace that tape. So
yeah, it'll last. I'm betting 30,000 miles.
Man, you are my kind of woman. You and your partner, I'm like, yeah, we could hang out. I'm all about everything you just said. Just patch stuff up, get things running. I got to tough it out for tonight, but I'll be back on the road tomorrow. Yeah, I'm on board. So I'm going to pick up your American Borders just to live your adventures. So, okay, okay. What I love about this story, though, beyond just the sort of Hemingway-esque roughing it and toughing everything out and thriving, I love the fact that you turned it into a business, but didn't just turn it into a business. You turned it into a business to help other authors, which, of course, anyone who knows anything about me, it's a huge passion of mine to help people, what I call will-be authors, to become published. So that's pretty fascinating. And what made you make the leap? Is it just because you self-published and saw that, or was there more research to it than that? Like, how'd you get to the friendly publishing?
Well, remember, I was a tech writer, so I'm a born geek and farm mechanic. My dad is a retired engineer, and I actually used to correct his reports when I was 12 because I'm really good at spelling and grammar. Yeah. So that came naturally, and I liked. Like all these self-publishing tools and services and ways to do it were coming up. Yeah. I met Mark Coker right away. Yeah. Like, why did you start Smashwords and how does it work? Like, how does the meat grinder work? What is that all about? And then, of course, Amazon and Barnes & Noble's Nook product and Book Surge, which became CreateSpace, right? And all that. So I would just, out of curiosity, test them all. And I'm a natural writer too. I have to write down everything. So
Yeah.
I just started blogging and reviewing, and people just came to me and asked all the time. And so instead of just one-on-one answering questions, I went, okay, I'm going to write a guide. And it was the self-publishing boot camp guide for authors,
Yeah.
which is coming up on its 4th edition this year.
Yeah.
And then I started giving classes again because I was tired of answering everybody's questions one by one, the same questions over and over again. And I would have Mark Coker come and talk, and Ingram Spark, and anybody who would come and talk about marketing or
Right.
websites. Linda Lee would talk about authors' websites, etc. Just everything you needed as an independent author from start to finish. And people would leave and they would write their books and build a platform. And a lot of them have been very successful.
Yeah.
It was awesome. It's awesome. And I know so many today.
Yeah.
So I continue to do it. At a certain point, though, I figured out that authors didn't really want to do it themselves.
Yeah.
And so I started Author Friendly as a publishing coaching service. And I have some do it for you services like formatting, and I help people. Like, I'm developing a class now that is helping authors finish their book. Like, their book is finished, but they're putting the cover together and they don't know what goes on the front and back matter. They have questions about ISBNs and LCCNs and CIP blocks for the libraries, and how much should it cost, and how do you put it on pre-sale, and which platform is the best for them. Is it Draft to Digital or Pronoun or Ingram Spark or a combination, right?
Yeah.
And then setting up discounting like 30% or 53%. There's all these final questions that are so hard to figure out on your own. And I just went with a few authors the other day for 3 hours just getting all of this put together, and I went, you know what, I'm going to just create a class on this because it's desperately needed. And so many people publish without knowing that it's not quite right.
Yeah.
Until later, and then they're embarrassed and they want to take it back. And of course, you can't take it back if it's in print, because once it's in print, it gets resold by Amazon resellers. So you've got that embarrassing cover or the weird copyright information that's not quite right, or spelling errors, and it's there forever. So I don't know. Draft to Digital is ebook, right? Ebook distributor. So it's always safer, I think, for people to publish their ebook first.
Yeah.
So that doesn't happen.
Yeah. I've actually gotten to a point where I will publish the ebook and the print version may not come out for several months later, because during the process of what I get is a ton of free editing. I send my book to editors, and I send my book to my street team, and I get lots of polish on it, and then you release it, and then everyone mercilessly attacks you for the typo on page 7 or whatever. And that helps me refine the book before I release it in print.
You know, Kevin, and that is so great, but so many authors are afraid to do this because they want their book to be perfect. And I always tell them beta publish. What you're doing is beta publishing.
Yeah.
So you're releasing it to the world. It's not perfect, but you're perfecting your book while you're building your platform, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're building your tribe, and you're finding out who your tribe is. And they're doing some developmental editing for you as well. They're like, wait, this character completely disappears and never comes back.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. If I hadn't had that happen, I would not have laughed so heartily. Now, I remember bringing this up in a certain panel at this last conference under the guise of minimal viable product. Do you remember this conversation we had?
I love that. In fact, I'm writing about that. The MVP. It's awesome. Yes. I love.
No one else liked that idea.
You know, you and I loved it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think the audience liked it. I think the authors who were there were like, I can just put out my story. It's a complete story.
Right.
You know, so what if it's not perfect? And you can put it out to a limited audience, which is what manufacturers do, right? They put it out to their biggest fans using, and you use Patreon, which is a tool for your tribe and your fans. So you could put it out just there, or you could use Gumroad to put it out, or
exactly.
you don't have to put an ISBN on it, right?
No.
It doesn't need to be recorded.
Right. No, exactly. And I think I think that represents a shift, right? Like what I see in the publishing world is a shift towards more of a software type model, where you might release a version of the software that's a little bit buggy, and people will know it's a little bit buggy, and then they will report those bugs to you so that you can fix them. And that's the way the software industry works, in part, in its simplest form. I don't want letters, okay? Everyone just back off. But the same applies to publishing, I think. And I think, from what I'm gathering from you, that's what you're promoting, right? You've got the same kind of general notion about get your work done, you get it done, but here's how the process for getting it right. You help with that.
And a lot of that is blogging. You can blog your book. Mira talks about blogging your book. A lot of people talk about that now. And there are other tools to create in-process books. The one that I think is most fascinating is LeanPub. LeanPub was built for computer book authors.
Yeah.
Because if you need to know how to program something, you don't care if there's spelling errors in it or if chapter 4 isn't finished yet. You just need to know how to do the dang thing.
Right.
You're desperate for the information. And it's expanded. A lot of other authors are starting to use it as a paid blogging system. While their book is in process. It's almost like a crowdfunding, pre-sales, platform building platform. It's not purpose built for that, but you can use it for all kinds of things.
That's interesting. I didn't even know about that. LeanPub. Is that
LeanPub?
LeanPub.com?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, check it out. It's pretty cool. There are a lot of ways you can raise money while you write. That's one of them. Patreon is the one you use, and I like for subscription-based content, and it allows for all this wonderful multimedia and personal contact.
Yeah. Yeah, and the biggest point there is to find a way to reach out to your audience and allow them the opportunity to support you. It's actually uncanny to me how many times authors shy away from asking for anything in return for what they're producing. And it's important that you get used to that idea, because that's the point, right?
If you want to make a living as an author, you need to sell it sometime.
Yeah, only if you want to make a living at it. If you don't want to make a living at it, then fine. Give it away. Mm-hmm. It's fine. All right. I'm dying to talk to you about so many other things, actually. But, all right, let's start with your website. Because there's a picture of you next to a motorcycle standing with a jet in the background. And I'm like, that's the coolest author photo I've ever seen.
Oh, this is the carlaking.com
carlaking.com. Yes, I'm sorry. I shifted gears on you. Now, everyone interested, by the way, in author-friendly, there are going to be links in the show notes. It is authorfriendly.com. That's an easy one to remember, and you should check that out. That's a beautiful site, too. I love the book with the girl and the umbrella. That's just a neat photo, a neat image.
I like it because it evokes the sense of a journey, right?
Yeah.
Through a book. And there's some rain, and there's a hot air balloon, and there's a dog, and grass and snow and a pen. I love that image.
Yeah, it's a great image.
Because it is a journey. Writing is a journey. Publishing is a journey. Life, of course, is a journey. But you wanted to talk about the travel.
Yeah, I mean, I did. Because you and I share, at least partially, we share that in common. We're a little different in our approach, but this idea of travel and exploring the world around us, we've already kind of given the origin story of why you started doing that. But is this something, I assume you're basically still doing this, right?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I have 2 careers. I help authors publish, and I travel and write and publish myself.
And how are you, like we said, everyone wants to be a travel writer. Mm-hmm. But is it just, are you able to just build on your past success? That's how you're getting
Yeah, you can imagine that in 95, there weren't a lot of women traveling solo through America, China, India, Africa.
Right.
Even the 2000s. It used to be, even in the decade before that, I would travel alone on a motorcycle, and people would be going, wow, what are you doing?
Right.
It's so dangerous. It's not dangerous.
Yeah.
It's not at all dangerous to travel alone as a woman. And I was a young, cute blonde, and people were like, people are going to take advantage of you. It never happened. It never happened.
Yeah.
People wanted to protect me, and it was really interesting.
That's okay. I'm an avid reader of these like travelogue essays, right?
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth Gilbert and company et al. So where is so American Borders is that for you, right? That's more or less that type of story.
That genre, and interesting because it is an Eat, Pray, Love or a wild genre, but the motorcycle, I have to break out of that stereotype because the motorcycle is a vehicle. It's not the journey. So it was the same kind of journey as Eat, Pray, Love, right? But it's got a motorcycle. So people see the motorcycle, they're like, oh, I don't motorcycle, so I'm not going to be interested in that. I'm like, do you climb mountains or did you enjoy Into Thin Air? Nobody says that.
You know what it is? It's the cover.
It's the cover, and I'm going to change that. So if you have any suggestions, that would be great. But I got to tell you, Kevin, the cover of American Borders, when I go to motorcycle shows, I sign books until my hand.
Look, there's no problem in having two versions of this book. Do two different covers.
I can do it.
Yeah.
I can do it.
Yeah, no, I've actually given this advice to someone before and watched them like climb charts and even become like a USA Today bestseller.
Really?
Yeah, because they have two different versions of the book, and one of them, the only real difference is honestly, there's like a different forward, I think, in both books, and the cover is different. The rest of the content is exactly the same, and it's marketed to different markets.
I need to retitle it too, because American Borders was the name of my blog during the time.
Yeah.
And it doesn't evoke what the book is really about. I mean, I went around America's borders, looking at the borders with Canada, Mexico, and talking about that, but it ended up being about borders between people, between races, between cultures. We're a very diverse culture here in the United States, and
that's
so
true.
I don't know how to retitle it.
All right, we're gonna work on that. Okay. I'm good with titles. I need to read it. I'll read it and then I'll come back with a title. I'm very good with titles.
Excellent.
It's fascinating. Actually, I'm totally trying to just glom onto what you're doing because I think it's awesome.
You could build a whole course around that, how to title your book.
I should do that.
Or a product, because titling is difficult. And even though I'm a longtime journalist, I always tell my editors in the magazines that I write for, I'm like, please retitle this because I suck at titles. Just do.
That's because it's a different skill. And this is what people don't click to. It's the same thing with copywriting versus writing a novel or writing even a nonfiction book. Copywriting is its own skill, and it's all about persuasion, which is exactly what a title is about. The goal is to persuade someone to pick it up, which means you're aiming at a specific audience, and you're using words that evoke an instant, clear image that would be attractive to that specific audience, and that's the trick. And there's nothing really all that, there's nothing you can do other than to pay attention to who you're trying to reach out to.
But I know exactly who I want to reach, but I can't figure out the words to make them buy my book. And so this is the other big sales tool in publishing is metadata, and your title and subtitle and your book description and your author name and your bio and keywords are all metadata, and they're absolutely the most important thing you can do for book marketing.
Yeah, trust me.
You know that.
Oh yeah, that's like I've told people before, copywriting is my staple skill. Like that's the thing that paid my bills for most of my life. And now it's a referral only business, but I still write book descriptions for some pretty big names out there. And it makes a huge difference. Like they'll bring me, here's the book description we've had for the past 2 years, and we'd like to spice it up, and it'll spike sales because it's more engaging. So it's a different skill. Anyway, I don't want to evangelize copywriting. I do that all the time, but I will be happy to read your book and come up with a new title if you're looking for it. I'd be happy to help.
I accept.
Okay. All right. Okay, and that's cool. What I love about that, I have a love for. And I really, ultimately, I would love to do some essay writing of this type. But I always feel like I don't know, something it's like copyright. It's like the difference between copywriting and other writing. It's like that's a different skill that I apparently have not nurtured. Although I do write short essay pretty well, but that whole pulling from your experiences and writing an entire book about it without it sounding like 300 pages of self-promotion. That's the problem I have.
Well, it still goes story by story, and when a travelogue, I guess that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And, do you know the Traveler's Tales series? It's a wonderful series of books, travelerstales.com. I think it's still at. And they have books. It was the first place I got published.
Okay.
I won an award for my story, that first travel writing conference I told you about earlier.
Yeah.
I had bicycled around West Africa solo for 4 months, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
It was really amazing. And I wrote a story about that, and it won the grand prize at the Writers' Conference.
Sweet, yeah.
And it got published in the Traveler's Tales food book. So they have country and even city-specific books, and then they have theme books like food or women or various. And it was a story about realizing that I had been eating monkey stew for quite a while and had no idea about it. Yeah, it's called Pass on the Primate.
Okay.
Yeah, and I had a lot of help with it, but it was just a moment in time. And I have to say, I had this friend, Susan, when I came back from Africa, and I was trying to be a travel writer, and she had hired me to work at Dive Travel magazine.
Okay.
For a while, and I said, I can't get this story about Africa out. And she goes, think of one moment. It could be like this one tiny thing that happened, and it could be 1 minute or 5 minutes, and just talk about that. And I thought about that story of the realization that I saw the dead monkey in the corner that I thought was sleeping, and then I realized it was dead, and realizing that was just weird. It was horrible to me to eat monkey. And just my whole emotional state over it, and just evoking every sense. So sensual detail, every single sense is evoked. And in travel writing, the sense of smell is often overlooked. And that's our the strongest sense that we have. So if you describe a smell, your reader is going to be more engaged in the story immediately than if you just use vision. So for a while, I had every sense, the little Post-it note on my computer, and I would go through my stories and make sure everyone was represented. I wrote about this for Kobo Writing Life not too long ago. If you just
Google
Carla King, Kobo, the sensual detail in travel writing. Or go to my blog there. It's recorded.
Okay.
But I know, Kevin, you can do it, and it only has to be a short little moment and small. And this series of books, Traveler's Tales, is a great way to enter the world of travel writing and essays.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I move around a lot, and I encounter a lot of people, and that's the kind of thing I would want to talk about most is the characters I meet who end up, not inconsequentially, they end up in my fiction very often. I'm half afraid to write about them in real life because people will see I'm cheating or something.
No, and they'll never recognize themselves. It's funny.
No, I know, that's true.
They won't.
It's true.
You can't be shy.
No.
And the more also with travel, and I think any kind of nonfiction, is the more intimate you get and detailed and scary it gets for you to write about a feeling or a situation, the more universal it really is, because people connect on that most intimate, most basic level instead of just talking about what you ate.
Yeah.
What your fears are, what maybe some of your biases are, and how you feel about them, and right?
Yeah. That's a good tip. That's another good tip. You've been full of good tips.
Oh, good.
I would expect that from somebody who's coaching authors in self-publishing, frankly. I'd be disappointed if you weren't full of good tips. But okay, we're past the. I don't want to take up too much of your time because you clearly have better things to do than talk to me. You have so much going on.
So silly. So we haven't even said the word digital nomad yet.
Oh, we should totally say digital nomad. So let's talk. We got time. We got a little time. If you're okay with it, we got a little time. You want to talk about digital nomadia?
I didn't even know that I was a digital nomad, but this is like the 30-something crowd.
Yeah.
They coined that term, and I was invited to be part of something called the Paradise Pack to help
Yeah.
people learn about how to make a living while they're on the road. And now we can, because we have laptops and Skype, which we're using now. And so you can be on the road constantly, or be in an apartment or a campground and still work. So that is digital nomadism.
Yeah.
We're doing it.
We're doing it, yeah, successfully, which, according to many of the adults in my life growing up, told me was never going to be possible.
I know. They said, oh, no, that's way in there. That's like 2050.
Yeah, yeah. Or get a real job is the way they put it to me.
Yeah. So the guys at Jason and Trav, they run a site and a podcast called Zero to Travel. And so they were the ones who invited me to be part of this thing. And so they specialize in talking about that and teaching people how to succeed at doing that.
I'll have to reach out to those guys. Sounds like the kind of podcast I should be on.
They're fun. They're fun guys. And they're very prolific. They have a lot of ideas about how to make money on the road.
Yeah. There's actually, it's funny because I talk to so many people who are doing this. Just I don't know, sometimes it's not even the point of the conversation. In fact, most of the time it's not. I'll interview someone for this show and discover that they're full-time remote, whatever. They're traveling the world. I'm talking to somebody in Singapore I didn't even know. And it's just become so common and so possible, and yet when I talk to people about it, they still think of it as being so far out of reach.
It's because we've been trained to love our material comforts and to be afraid of actually living instead of sitting in our house all day and being afraid to travel. It's not a dangerous thing.
No, but it is scary. You do get out there sometimes and things go wrong and the rain starts and there's no place to pull off. For example, in our rig here, for some reason, the windshield wipers will just fail. Just randomly. Usually on the heaviest rain day you can imagine. And more than once now, we've taken it out. And I think the problem is finally fixed for good. So I don't want people thinking I'm living in a trash heap on wheels. But it's just the standard new RV shakedown stuff. But we're driving to Florida over Thanksgiving, and it was pouring down rain here when we left. And the wipers just stopped. And there's literally nothing I can do. Like I can't pull over because I can't see. The only thing I can do, I can see just well enough to see the lines I'm supposed to be staying in and the car in front of me. And so all I can do is drive by the force until this storm stops. And that's happened more than once. So it can get scary. But the thing is, now I have that story, right? And that story feeds so many other things now. Like I think I drew upon it at least once already for one of my thrillers, a scene in one of my thrillers. And if I ever get around to essay writing, I'll have to write it down. But that's the point, right? Sometimes scary things happen, but you can grow from that. That's the fun part.
Oh, yeah. That is the fun part. Yeah, I always say that. When disaster strikes, I'm like stuck out in the middle of the Sahara Desert.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because
what happens now?
You don't remember the 10 hours of driving with no problems. You just remember the 45 seconds of your mirror falling off or something. That's the stuff you remember.
Okay, so here's our task. So you help me with my title, and I'll help you with your first travel essay.
Okay, so, you got it. You got it. Yeah, I can live with that deal. I don't even know what that's going to look like. You've got your work cut out for you.
No, you do, because you have to write it.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure I could write it. I've probably already done what is needed to do this stuff, but that's the point, is I don't know what it should look like when it's done. Even though I read tons of these things, it's okay, what does a Kevin Tumlinson essay look like when it's done? So I need to get on that. We'll do it. Teamwork. All right. Okay, I do want to wrap up now. Definitely want to keep you from having to hang out with me too long. And everyone listening to this show, there are so many things that you're going to want to know about Carla King. I know that I got a ton more questions I could ask, but you can start learning more about her at her websites. First, check out authorfriendly.com. If you are an author, a will-be author or otherwise, and you're looking for ways to bump up your career and do even more with it, definitely check out authorfriendly.com. I'm looking at the marketing stuff. I'm thinking maybe I could get some use out of that. And check out carlaking.com, where you can see some cool photos of her in front of a jet. That's actually cool. I don't have that. And otherwise, you'll find all these links and more in the show notes. Carla, thanks so much for being on. I've really enjoyed this interview.
It's been fun, Kevin. Thanks for having me. Bye.
All right, that was my interview with Carla King. I hope you enjoyed that. If you are dipping your toes into the waters of self-publishing, you might want to go pick up the Self-Publishing Bootcamp. I'll see everyone next week.